Hi, I'm Dom from Solida. Today I'm going to cover my top 3 tips for using Notion buttons effectively. Before we do that though, let's have a look at what a Notion button is. So it is a block which you can create by using the usual / command, and it will automatically run through a set of actions when a button is clicked. So we've just started creating one here. We can give it a name and we can give it an icon. Once we've done that, we have 5 possible actions. That extends to 6 actions if you are creating a button within a page that is already in a database. But these 5 actions here are to insert blocks either above and below where the button is, to add a page to a database that you select, to edit pages in a database that you select, to show a confirmation box before the button action is completed, and to open a page within a database that you select. We can add as many of these steps as we like in any combination. You can move the actions around, you can duplicate them, you can select databases, and you can change properties within the pages that you edit and create. If you would like some ideas on how you can use Notion buttons, I'd recommend checking out Notion's resource on this, which goes through a few different examples, and I will link to that resource in the description. Okay, so now we have a general idea of what a button is. Let's get into my 3 tips. And to do this, I'm just going to use a template that I'm working on where I've got a few different examples of buttons. The first tip is not to get too overzealous with buttons and try and use them for everything. Remember, if you want to add a new database item, there is already a button for that in every database view. Here we can click new, and up here we can click new. Same in this database here, we can click new. So you don't need to create a button when you just want to add a new page to something. Buttons should be used to enhance your workflow, not to clutter your page. And at the same time, they don't need to be too fancy. One useful thing about buttons is that you can create a database entry and edit its properties at the same time. So for this tasks database here, I have 4 buttons on the left-hand side, and all each one does is create a new entry to the task database, but each time the tag is different. So this one is priority, this one is schedule, this one is backlog, and this one is batch. Previously, to do that, you would have had to have hit the new button up here, and then you would have had to change the effort and impact variables to get the correct action tag, which obviously is quite a few more steps than just clicking on this button, which, as you can see here, immediately creates it with the action tag that you've selected. So that's a really good use case of how a button can just remove a few steps from your workflow. The second tip is that as your buttons start to become more complicated, you should consider adding confirmation pop-ups in case you accidentally click on the button. So these buttons were fairly simple, but these buttons here have quite a few steps involved. As you can see, we add a team member to the team member document. We create a bunch of new tasks and change a bunch of properties within each task. And we then create a new project and link all of these tasks. So what we don't want is someone accidentally clicking this button when they didn't want to do that, or accidentally clicking the button twice and going through every single one of those stages twice. So what we have is a confirmation button that actually explains what is going to happen once you click the button and gives you the option to either continue or to cancel. So being able to customize that text is really useful. And it's especially useful if the person that created the button isn't going to be the end user. Because what you don't want is the end user having to click into the settings of the button every single time they're going to use it to remind themselves what the button does, or fat fingering and clicking the button by mistake. So now that we know when to use buttons and how to manage more complex buttons, let's move on to the third tip, which focuses a bit more on how our buttons look. Because as well as being able to change the color of the icon associated with each button, you can now change the color of a button. And this is really useful for indicating what a button is associated to. And I definitely recommend color coding your buttons. So going back to the example we used earlier, the priority tag, when you click on it, is red. And so I quite simply have made the priority button red. And I followed that same logic through with all of the buttons here. What I tend to use for buttons that don't change a specific tag is I try and match the color of the button to the color that I've chosen for the database. So the task database is blue, this text is blue here, the icon for the task database is blue, and so any button that covers all of the tasks and not necessarily a specific property is colored blue, like this start all button and this complete today button. And this might not seem too useful when we're just dealing with a view like this, where there's only one database, but take this database view, for example, where we've got meetings in a database, and then in the next tab, we have stakeholders in a different database. Now the stakeholders database is colored pink and the meetings database is colored purple. And so quite simply what I've done is make the meetings button purple and the stakeholder button pink. And that just makes it really, really clear from a design perspective which button is impacting at a glance which database. Now, those are just 3 really quick tips, and there is a lot more to be said about buttons in Notion. I haven't even covered buttons within databases, which will probably be the topic of a separate video. But hopefully this has been a helpful intro into what I think is a really great Notion feature. Thanks for watching.